I still vividly remember the bone-chilling cold of that Chicago winter, the streets blanketed in white snow, and the glowing Christmas lights in every window that seemed to wrap the city in a warm embrace. But beneath the festive cheer, a quiet anxiety simmered in my heart. My name is Rachel, 33 years old, a lawyer who spent over a decade proving to the world that I could raise a child on my own while building a solid career. I don't regret my choices, because the most precious thing in my life is my daughter, Sophie, a 10-year-old with bright eyes and a kind heart that sometimes makes me feel small in comparison. Sophie is the reason I've never given up. I had her during my final year of law school, while my peers were chasing international internships or promising job opportunities. Meanwhile, I sat in the library late into the night, pregnant, memorizing legal statutes and trial principles, trembling with fear, but fueled by determination. Sophie's father disappeared early on, leaving me to face every responsibility alone. Every night, I'd look at my tiny daughter sleeping peacefully in my arms and silently vow to give her a safe, warm life, no matter the cost. But there's one thing I've never been able to give her: a complete family. The only relatives we stay in touch with are my parents, my father, Edward, and my mother, Margaret. Edward is a gentle but weak man, avoiding conflict his entire life. He's never raised his voice to me, but he's also never stood up for me against my mother. Margaret, on the other hand, is the opposite: cold, exacting, valuing appearances over emotions. She has her own rigid standards for success and propriety, and I've never quite measured up in her eyes. Ever since I became a single mother, her judgment has grown harsher. She never forgave me for having a child out of wedlock, as if it were an indelible stain. Even though Sophie has grown into a healthy, well-mannered, and bright girl, Margaret always finds ways to compare her to Olivia, my cousin, and her perfect children. Olivia married into wealth, with two impeccably dressed, well-behaved kids who are always presented as the gold standard in my mother's eyes. Every time I hear her praise Olivia while subtly criticizing Sophie, my heart aches. Not for myself, but because I know Sophie feels it. This year, Sophie was more excited than ever. She spent weeks preparing handmade gifts for her grandparents. With her small, deft hands, she carefully decorated a wooden fishing tackle box for my father, carved with colorful little fish, because she knew how much he loved summer fishing trips. For my mother, she made a photo album filled with pictures of the two of us, with blank spaces left for future photos with Grandma. Watching her work so earnestly, her eyes shining with hope, warmed my heart but also left it stinging. At 10 years old, Sophie is more mature than her age suggests. I know she longs for a big family, with loving grandparents and cozy Christmas gatherings like something out of a storybook. Her friends at school have grandparents who come to their winter plays and give them gifts wrapped in red paper with golden ribbons. Sophie wants that too, and despite my own disappointments, I held on to a flicker of hope that this time, my mother might be different. Chicago winters are never gentle, but I still believe the holiday season could have a healing magic. On those freezing nights, I'd sit by the window watching snowflakes fall, remembering how last year, my mother actually came to Sophie's school play. When she heard Sophie sing, she smiled, even if just for a moment. To me, that smile was like a door cracking open, a fragile promise that she might change. But reason reminded me that people rarely change overnight. My best friend Jasmine said as much. Rachel, you always want to believe in the best in people, but your mom, she's too used to controlling everything, too set in her harsh ways. Don't let Sophie get hurt. I knew Jasmine was right, but watching Sophie carefully glue photos into the album, her eyes sparkling with faith, I couldn't bring myself to crush her hope. That night, after Sophie went to bed, I sat quietly in the living room, flipping through the half-finished album. The small photos, the blank spaces waiting for new memories, they were like innocent whispers. Our family will be whole someday. I wanted to believe it, but deep in my heart, a quiet unease crept in. I knew my mother, and I knew her ways weren't easily changed. Would she truly open her heart to Sophie? Or was this just another setup for more cruel words? I sighed softly, clenching my fists as if to steel my resolve. This time, I had to be stronger. If anything happened, I wouldn't let Sophie face the hurt alone. As I write this, I know many of you have felt that same mix of hope and fear, longing for a complete family. Maybe you've craved acceptance from loved ones, or seen a child's eyes light up with hope for unconditional love. If you know that feeling, please leave a comment below so we can share our stories. I still clearly remember that morning when the phone rang while I was making breakfast for Sophie. The name on the screen made my heart sink. Mom. Every time I heard her voice, I never knew whether I'd get concern or a cutting remark. Rachel, her voice came through, polished as if she were running an important meeting. About Christmas, we need to discuss Sophie's outfit. I was taken aback. She has a beautiful red velvet dress, Mom. She's excited to wear it that day. There was a brief pause, followed by a pointed sigh. Red velvet, hmm? I'm just worried. It's a bit lacking in elegance. Olivia said her kids will be wearing designer clothes. I don't want Sophie to look out of place in the family photos. Her words cut like a cold knife. I forced my voice to stay calm. Sophie's 10, Mom. She looks radiant in that dress. And more importantly, she feels confident and happy. Just a suggestion, she said dismissively. Think about it. People will notice. I hung up, my hand still gripping the spoon tightly. Outside the window, snow fell lightly, but the chill I felt came from her words. That evening, my father, Edward, called. It was rare for him to call on his own, as he usually let my mother steer every conversation. His voice made me instinctively wary. Rachel, how are you and Sophie doing? He began with his usual small talk. I responded, searching for a trace of warmth in his belated concern. After some hesitation, he lowered his voice. Your mom, she's been acting a bit strange lately, more tense than usual. I waited for him to continue, but all I got was a hesitant throat clearing. What do you mean, Dad? Is something going on? No, it's just, you know how she is. He quickly backed off, as always. When I hung up, I sighed, my father, always avoiding conflict. He saw, he knew, but he never dared to face it. That made me both pity and resent him, and it only deepened my unease. If even Edward noticed something off, this Christmas might not be as peaceful as I'd hoped. Sophie, on the other hand, was completely different. She chattered all day, her eyes sparkling as she talked about her grandparents, their Christmas tree, and the secret gifts. Mom, I think Grandpa will love this fishing box. I even drew colorful fish on it, and Grandma will smile when she sees the photo album, right? I watched her tiny hands carefully gluing photos, her eyes free of doubt, filled only with pure faith that love could bridge any gap. I smiled at her, but inside a small crack began to form in my heart. A few days later, I met Jasmine at our usual coffee shop. She looked at me with a mix of worry and resolve. Rachel, do you really believe this year will be different? I twirled my latte cup, taking a deep breath. My mom came to Sophie's play last month. She even smiled. Maybe she's changing. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Someone like Margaret? Have you forgotten all these years? One smile doesn't erase a decade of harsh words. I just don't want you and Sophie to get hurt again. Her words rang like a warning bell, but I clung to my fragile hope. Maybe this time is different. Sophie's prepared everything. I don't want to crush her faith. Jasmine shook her head, sighing. I get it. But remember, you need to be ready to protect your daughter, even if it means letting go of the dream of a perfect family. The following days, our little home was filled with Christmas spirit. Sophie hung wreaths on the door, baked snowman-shaped cookies, and softly sang carols. The living room was littered with colored paper, scissors, glue, and photos. She poured her heart into the album for her grandmother, working so diligently she forgot to eat. One evening, I watched her hunched over the table, her small back trembling with each careful cut. The desk lamp cast a glow on her serious face. My heart swelled with an indescribable love. She should only be worrying about fairy tales and ice skating, not making gifts to earn acceptance from her own family. I sat beside her, gently touching her hair. Sophie, you're working so hard. Grandma might not appreciate it all. She looked up, her eyes shining with determination. But I believe she'll see it, Mom. If I try hard, she'll love me. Her words pierced my heart like a knife. I gave a strained smile, but inside my unease grew stronger. That night, after Sophie was asleep, I sat alone in the living room. Before me was the unfinished album, its blank spaces waiting for new memories. I ran my fingers over the pages, suddenly choking up. Would this time be different? Or was I just fooling myself, setting us up for more disappointment? Snow fell heavily outside, blanketing the street. I shivered, unsure if the cold came from the weather or from within. If you've ever stood between hope and fear, you'll understand how I felt. I wanted to believe, but the truth was, cracks were already forming, no matter how hard I tried to hide them. And you know what? Just 2 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, those cracks shattered into the biggest storm of my life. If you find this story compelling, comment Y. If not, comment N. I used to think that, no matter what happened, Christmas would always bring a touch of magic. But that year, instead of magic, my daughter and I faced a nightmare I still can't forget. The morning of December 25th, Chicago was freezing. Snow covered the sidewalks, sparkling under rare sunlight. Sophie cheered as I opened the car door, clutching her handmade gifts for her grandparents. Mom, I think Grandpa will laugh so big when he opens this fishing box. And Grandma will definitely be surprised by the album. Her voice was so joyful it lightened my heart. We arrived at my parents' house on time. Their classic two-story home was decked out beautifully, with a towering Christmas tree nearly touching the ceiling, its lights twinkling softly. Edward opened the door, his face lighting up when he saw Sophie. "There's my favorite little girl." He bent down to hug her, genuine joy in his eyes. I realized that, at least, Edward truly loved Sophie, even if he never had the courage to stand up to Margaret. My mother appeared moments later. Margaret wore a striking red sweater, her hair neatly styled, her demeanor as polished as if she were hosting dignitaries. She bent to hug Sophie, but it was a fleeting touch, not warm. I caught the familiar frown when her eyes landed on Sophie's red velvet dress. "Well, it's decent," she murmured, then quickly turned away. I swallowed my frustration, telling myself things were still okay. The morning went smoothly enough. Edward took Sophie to the corner of the room to hang more ornaments on the tree. She giggled as he playfully dropped them and slipped peppermint candies into her pocket. Seeing them, my heart warmed, as if hope hadn't entirely faded. Then my phone rang. It was Alexandra, my senior partner at the law firm. My heart sank. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Rachel, I'm sorry, but we have an emergency. The European contract has a serious issue. If we don't fix it today, the deal's off." I reeled. "It's Christmas. I'm with my family." "Just a few hours. You're the only one who knows the details. I know it's tough, but there's no other way." I closed my eyes. The familiar tug-of-war returned. Work or family? But this time I had no choice. I went back to the living room, forcing a smile. "Sweetie, Mommy has to go to work for a bit. You'll stay here with Grandma and Grandpa, okay? I'll be back soon." Sophie looked sad but nodded. "I'll be good. Come back soon, Mommy." I hugged her tightly, my heart aching. As I left the house, a vague unease lingered, one I couldn't fully explain. While I rushed to the office, Sophie stayed behind. She later told me that the moment I left, the atmosphere changed completely. Olivia and her 2 children entered the living room, polished and aloof. When Edward invited Sophie to play chess, Charlotte glanced at her, then pulled her brother away, leaving Sophie confused. Sophie tried to connect, but she only got cold looks. Olivia smiled sweetly at Margaret, talking about her daughter's piano lessons and her son's math awards, while Sophie sat quietly, clutching her unopened gifts. When the kids were allowed to open one gift early, Sophie timidly asked, "Can I open one too, Grandma?" That's when Margaret's sharp words cut through. "No, Sophie. There's no gift for you today. You're not really my granddaughter. You were born out of wedlock, and that will never change." Her words hit like a hammer. Sophie froze, tears welling up, but Margaret just turned to smile at Olivia. Edward, witnessing it all, didn't say a word. Sophie later told me Margaret added, "You don't belong in this family. Go upstairs and don't bother us." Clutching her gifts, Sophie silently climbed the stairs. Upstairs, she was left alone in a cold guest room, Downstairs, the Christmas dinner buzzed with laughter, while Sophie sat on the bed, hungry and crying. When I finished work and hurried back, it was already dark. The house glowed like a Christmas card. But my steps trembled as I opened the door. Sophie was nowhere in sight. I asked frantically. Edward avoided my eyes, and Margaret said casually, "She's resting upstairs. She was a bit naughty." My heart clenched. I raced upstairs and opened the door. The sight nearly broke me. Sophie sat curled up on the bed, her dress wrinkled, her face streaked with tears. When she saw me, she burst into sobs and ran into my arms. "Grandma said I'm not her real granddaughter," she cried. "She said I can't eat dinner, that there's no gift for me. She said I don't belong in the family." My whole body shook as I listened. Each word from Sophie carved into my heart like a knife. I held her tightly, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I knew I was done holding back. All the times I stayed silent, swallowed my tears to keep the peace. It was over. I wiped Sophie's tears and whispered, "Sweetie, I promise, from now on, no one will make you feel like you don't belong. We'll face this together. I'll protect you." She nodded, her eyes still red but glinting with hope. I took a deep breath, feeling my anger turn into strength. My steps were steady as I held Sophie's hand and walked back downstairs. That Christmas Eve, I wasn't just a single mom anymore. I became a warrior. And when the dining room door opened, with everyone gathered around the candlelit table, I knew the real storm was just beginning. If you want to hear more stories like this or relate to the struggles I'm facing, check out my previous videos on this channel. There are moments in life when you know you can't turn back. That Christmas Eve, as I held Sophie's small hand and led her downstairs, my heart pounded, but my steps were strangely steady. I'd heard too many harsh words, endured too much disdain. But seeing my daughter trembling in tears, all the silence I'd kept for years turned into a burning fire. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder. I whispered to Sophie, "Tell me again, sweetie, so no one can deny it." She hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a trembling voice. Each word, each sob, was clear. "Grandma said I'm not her real granddaughter. She said I don't belong in this family." I saved the recording, my heart aching, but more determined than ever. When the dining room door opened, the warm golden light from the table contrasted sharply with the cold in my heart. Everyone was gathered, laughing as if nothing had happened. Olivia raised her wine glass. Greg sat quietly. Charlotte and William focused on their plates. Margaret sat at the head of the table, regal, with a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. Everything stopped when Sophie and I walked in. The room fell silent, as if I'd disrupted a perfectly staged play. "Why is she down here?" Margaret asked, her voice sharp as a blade. "She needs to stay upstairs until she learns to behave properly." I squeezed Sophie's hand and stepped forward. My voice was low but clear. "It's because of your behavior that she needs to be here." The table went silent. I looked straight at Margaret, her eyes flickering briefly but quickly hardening again. "What are you doing, Rachel?" Olivia interjected, trying to keep her tone calm. "It's Christmas. We shouldn't argue." I turned to her, my lips tight. "No, Olivia, it's Christmas, and that's exactly why we can't let a child be humiliated in this house." Edward shifted uncomfortably, his eyes betraying his unease. "Rachel, maybe we should talk later." "No, Dad," I cut him off, my voice ringing louder than I expected. "Later doesn't matter. Now is the time." I played the recording. Sophie's small, pained voice filled the silent room. "Grandma said, I'm not her real granddaughter. I don't belong in this family." Charlotte's head snapped up, her eyes wide. William flushed, fidgeting. Greg coughed and looked away. Olivia paled, and Edward bowed his head, his hands trembling. Margaret sat still, her face pale but her lips composed. "That was just discipline. Children need to know their place." "Their place?" I repeated, my voice shaking with fury. "A 10-year-old deserves love, not rejection. You turned her holiday into a nightmare. That's not discipline, it's cruelty." "Rachel, you're blowing this out of proportion," Margaret shot back, her eyes flashing with anger. "A family needs order. Olivia and her children know how to behave, but you—" "Enough!" I shouted, startling the entire table. "Enough, Mom. I've stayed silent too long. I've endured your comparisons, your criticisms, but today you went too far by targeting my daughter. No one, not even you, has the right to tell Sophie she doesn't belong in this family. Sophie gripped my hand tightly, her eyes red but resolute. I felt strength in her small hand, like a spark igniting my courage. Edward spoke up softly, his voice trembling. Margaret, you were wrong. She's our granddaughter. She doesn't deserve this. It was the first time I'd ever seen my father stand up to my mother. His eyes were lost but sincere. Margaret turned sharply to him, her gaze cutting, but he continued. I can't pretend I don't see it anymore. I'm tired of staying silent. Olivia gave a nervous laugh, chiming in. Aunt Margaret was just trying to help Sophie. Let's not make a big deal out of it. Charlotte suddenly dropped her spoon, her voice shaky. No, Mom. I saw Sophie crying. I don't think Grandma was right. I don't want to stay quiet. The room froze. Olivia went silent. Greg looked down, and William fidgeted nervously. I looked around, taking a deep breath. Family isn't about blood or the standards you impose, Mom. Real family is unconditional love. If you can't understand that, then you've already excluded yourself from this family. Margaret stood abruptly, her face flushed. You dare speak to me like that in my own house? I held Sophie's hand, my eyes no longer trembling. Not only do I dare speak, I dare to leave. I won't let my daughter grow up in a fake home where love comes at the cost of perfection. No one responded. I bent down to pick up the two gifts Sophie had brought but hadn't given. She clutched them to her chest, her face tear-streaked but her eyes shining with pride. We turned and walked out. Behind us, the Christmas lights still glowed, but the laughter faded into heavy silence. As the door slammed shut, cold wind hit my face, and I took a deep breath. I knew in that moment, Sophie and I had left behind a false family to find real love. I held her hand tightly as we walked away from that brightly lit house. My heart ached, but within that pain was strength. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I'd made my choice. No turning back, no compromising. And I also knew the storm was only beginning. What happened next would change my life, Sophie's, and even Margaret's forever. Someone once told me that after a great storm, the ground never returns to how it was. That Christmas Eve left cracks too deep to mend, and just days later, the consequences began to surface, faster than I expected. Word spread quickly in my parents' small community. I didn't share the recording widely, but Sophie's story, coupled with my unusual silence, was enough to turn heads toward Margaret. Those who once praised her as the model of a proper family woman began whispering doubts. A week later, I got a call from Catherine, the vice president of the charity foundation where Margaret worked. Her voice was cold and firm. Rachel, the board met. Your mother will no longer serve as president. We need a representative who upholds true family values. I went silent. I never meant to ruin my mother's reputation, but she'd dismantled it herself. It didn't stop there. The elite club she was so proud to be part of temporarily suspended her membership pending further review. I knew, for Margaret, that hurt more than any reprimand. She valued her reputation and status above all, and now it was slipping away. Meanwhile, Edward began to change. One afternoon, he showed up at my door, standing quietly, as if wrestling with his courage. When I opened it, he spoke immediately, his voice choked. Rachel, I'm sorry. I've been silent too long. That night, I saw everything, and I couldn't take it anymore. I looked at him, torn between pain and relief. Dad, I'm not mad because you're kind. I'm mad because you stayed silent. But if you really want to change now, start with Sophie. She deserves a grandfather who stands up for her. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll do it, I promise. And he kept his word. He started calling Sophie, taking her to museums and fishing trips. Though she was cautious at first, I saw a warmth in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. I also took Sophie to a child psychologist. I didn't want silent wounds festering in her heart. The doctor advised, let her express her emotions. Don't push her to forgive right away. Children are often forgiving, but being rejected by family leaves deep scars. Sophie surprised me. After a few sessions, she said quietly, Mom, I don't hate Grandma. I'm just sad. I want her to know I still see her as my grandma, even if she doesn't see me as her granddaughter. I choked up, torn between pride and heartache. My 10-year-old understood forgiveness better than most adults. Then came the bombshell. One weekend evening, Edward called, his voice panicked. "Rachel, your mom, she collapsed. The doctor says it's a mild stroke. She's in the hospital." I froze, my heart racing. I'd imagined many scenarios, but never thought Margaret, the woman as tough as steel, could fall. Instantly, Sophie overheard and ran to hug me. "What's wrong with Grandma? Is she in pain?" Her eyes welled with worry, even though just weeks ago, that same woman had torn her heart apart. I bit my lip. Part of me wanted to say coldly, "She reaps what she sows." But looking at Sophie's innocent eyes, I couldn't. "I want to see her," Sophie said softly, her voice firm. "Sophie, you don't have to," I replied quickly. "She hurt you. You don't owe her anything." She shook her head. "I don't want her to carry anger. I still want her to be my grandma, Mom. If she goes without me saying that, I'll regret it." Tears fell as I stood powerless before her purity. For years, I'd fought to shield Sophie from pain, but now she was teaching me what forgiveness meant. All night, I wrestled with myself. I feared Sophie would be hurt again, that Margaret's remorse was just an act. But I also knew that stopping her would deny her the chance to heal in her own way. Finally, I looked at Sophie sleeping peacefully, her face serene, her lashes still wet with dried tears, and I whispered, "All right, I'll go with you, but I won't let anyone hurt you again, I promise." The next morning, I held Sophie's hand as we left the house. Snow still fell heavily, the sky gray, mirroring my mood. She gripped my hand, carrying the small bracelet she'd made, one that should have been under the Christmas tree that night. "I want to give this to Grandma," Sophie said, her eyes shining brightly. I nodded, my heart tight. I knew we were walking into a new climax, where love and pain intertwined, where I'd face the hardest confrontation across 3 generations. There are moments you can't avoid, no matter how used to fighting you are. That morning, stepping into the cold hospital corridor, I felt like I was going against every decision I'd made before. I'd sworn never to let Margaret hurt Sophie again. Yet here was Sophie, holding my hand tightly, her eyes clear, saying, "I want to see Grandma." I was both terrified and curious. Would this meeting tear my daughter's heart further, or open a path I hadn't dared imagine? The hospital room was lit only by harsh fluorescent lights, making everyone look more exhausted. Margaret lay on the bed, her face pale, her once perfect hair disheveled, her hands, once quick to judge, now trembling uncontrollably. I looked at her, seeing not the commanding woman, but a small, fragile and, for the first time, vulnerable person. Sophie stepped forward, her steps slow. I saw her take a deep breath, gathering all the courage in her small body. She opened her cloth bag and pulled out the handmade bracelet. The green, red, and yellow beads she'd painstakingly crafted in our little room now rested in her palm. "Grandma," Sophie said, her voice trembling but clear, "I know you might not see me as your granddaughter, but I still want you to be my grandma." With that, she gently lifted Margaret's hand and slipped the bracelet onto her frail wrist. I saw Margaret flinch, her lips trembling, and then, something I never expected, tears began streaming down her face, once so stern. She broke down, not with restrained tears but with deep, childlike sobs, as if she'd lost something precious. "Sophie, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was too rigid, too cruel. I don't deserve." Sophie shook her head, gently squeezing her hand. "I just want you to know I love you, even if you never said you loved me." I stood frozen, my heart torn between pain and relief. Part of me wanted to shield Sophie from this sudden vulnerability, but another part softened, witnessing my daughter's forgiveness. I stepped forward, placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder, and looked straight at Margaret. "Mom," I said slowly, "I can't forgive everything in a day. What you said and did to Sophie will always leave scars, but I won't stop Sophie if she wants to offer her forgiveness. That's her choice, not mine." Margaret sobbed, managing a nod. "I understand. I just hope I can have a chance to do better." Edward, who'd been silent, stood up. His eyes were wet as he approached the bed. "Margaret, I've stayed quiet too long. I let you hurt our daughter, our granddaughter. From now on, I won't stay silent. I'll be the grandfather Sophie needs, the father Rachel deserves." His words choked me up. For years, I'd longed to hear my father say that. Late, but not too late. Sophie looked up, her eyes teary. I believe you, Grandpa. I want to go fishing with you like you promised. Edward laughed through his tears. You got it, my granddaughter. In that small room, 3 generations of us quietly embraced. It wasn't an embrace that erased all wrongs, but a fragile, trembling one, holding a tiny seed of hope. I knew boundaries still needed setting, and many wounds couldn't heal overnight. But we'd found a flicker of light in the darkness. I looked at Margaret, my voice calm but firm. Families aren't perfect, but with love and forgiveness, we can start again, with open hearts and clear boundaries. Mom, if you want to move forward, you have to accept both. She nodded, her eyes blurred with tears. I'll try. For you, for Sophie. I squeezed Sophie's hand. A voice inside me rang clear. The journey wasn't over, but we'd turned to a new chapter. As we left the hospital, snow still fell heavily. I looked up at the gray sky, feeling lighter than ever. Sophie nestled close, whispering, Mom, I think Grandma changed a little. Maybe she needs love too, like everyone else. I kissed her hair, thinking, You've taught me what forgiveness means. But deep inside, a quiet question lingered. Was this change real or just fleeting remorse? The future would tell. Perhaps the greatest lesson from this journey is about love and boundaries. I learned that family doesn't always mean warmth, but with love and forgiveness, we can plant seeds of hope. Sophie taught me that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving yourself peace. Edward gave me faith that, however late, people can change. And Margaret, through her fall, reminded me that rigidity and coldness only lead to loneliness. I believe we all carry family wounds. But if we center love and find the courage to say no to toxicity, we can rediscover ourselves and protect those we cherish most. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment to share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join me in spreading more human stories. Thank you for being here.